Okay. I'm so sorry. Okay, for everybody else that forgot, I'm gonna try to like redo. This is the part of the problem where I suck at these webinars. Okay, so the feminine principle separates from the masculine principle at the origins of the universe. And when that happens, it's as if these little identities that are separate start to develop. And as those little identities start to develop, these patterns of identity start to get created about finding or looking for the masculine principle outside of itself. So the way they usually explain this as humans is, as humans, we develop a personality and an identity and look for the thing that's going to fill us up outside, and or fill us up, or that place of oneness of the feminine principle and the masculine principle together, or Shiva and Shakti together. So for some people, it's drugs, alcohol, it could be power, it could be anything out here that feels like once I get this, I will be united and I will be whole. And the problem is these patterns have been happening for, in this tradition, millions and millions and millions of years of solidifying these patterns down until you get to where we are here today, and we're this huge accumulated bunch of patterns that's been going on for so long, and then we just get stuck and we get mired down. And in the Buddhist tradition, this is called getting caught or getting stuck in Maya. And so we get mired down and the patterns are just overwhelming and we can't break out of them. And it's important to remember that from this tradition, we've gotten here because we are fulfilling this original pattern or desire of the universe for separateness. And so what a lot of people like to do, and especially in our culture, is we like to separate into good and bad. Is this a good thing is oneness, and a bad thing is separation. That falls apart completely. Both things are happening at the same time. There's really no good or bad with this. And we're going to talk about what that means and why that's so dangerous in a little bit. It's just, yes, non-dualism, exactly. It's incredibly challenging, actually, what that means, especially in a dualistic world. So you, me, everybody that's here on this webinar is an aspect of the feminine principle, and we have developed collections of patterns and identities based on our unique expression of searching for the masculine principle outside of ourselves. Make sense? Okay. So from this tradition, what happens is when we have gone through life after life after life after life after life after life over and over and over, and when we've hit whatever version of our version of rock bottom is, this prayer opens up inside of us to go back to that original state of oneness, that sensation in that place. It's like we got to go on this train of forgetting, and then we come back to this remembering. And that point over here of rock bottom, like AA hitting rock bottom, is the prayer to go back and is the seed of the awakening of Kundalini. Now, because we live in a Western culture where we just want to take a pill, most people have their Kundalini awakening and they say, that's it. Good, I'm done. I have achieved my, and that is ridiculous nonsense for most people. Look, some people may be able to just get one hit and boom, they're back. What happens is along the way back, once we get that taste of Kundalini or spirit, it also starts to say, hey, do you want to hang out here for a little bit and still this place of separateness, but explore it from a place where maybe you're not as fucked up. And that's fine. And so if we can understand that there's a pulsing between this forgetting and remembering that all of us are in, and if we can get away from labeling this goodness of oneness and badness of duality, we can have some fun with it. Okay. Whew. Okay. So let me see what I'm going to do. Let me see if I can pull up my notes a little bit here. Okay. right now I want to talk about some of the problems. You guys have all heard of the issues with awakening Kundalini and why it's so dangerous, right? So we're going to explore that a little bit. It is, for many reasons, incredibly dangerous. And there's a lot of ways to think about this, but the way I'm going to talk about this here today is that the Kundalini, as this pure manifestation of the spirit, it's almost as if the spirit itself is inherently chaotic. So if we remember going back to this feminine principle and masculine principle, and I know I'm using gendered language here, and this is just a part of the tradition. So we're not talking about men and women, we're just talking about this gendered language as is applied to these concepts, and you can translate them differently if you want. The spirit is just chaotic. So if you've had the Kundalini come and it's shaking or you're vibrating and all of a sudden you're in this place of chaos and things are waking up, a part of what's happening is, and a part of what a lot of the practices are, is to develop, that's the Shakti. If you remember, we talked about Shiva and Shakti. Shakti is the goddess, the spirit that's chaotic, and Shiva, if we remember that the Shakti is all of the things that are in the world, you, me, all of the matter, all of the energy, and the Shiva is the underlying structure that's underneath all of that and within all of that, that's giving it form and direction. So when people have awakened their Kundalini and they start to go crazy, a part of it is just a natural thing that needs to happen. But what it's showing is that there's an underlying disharmony in our structure. So this is where the traditions say you've got to have a disciplined practice. And in the West, in our country, we usually hate discipline, or everybody hates discipline. Everybody hates discipline. Discipline sucks. But we have a real aversion to discipline. We have an aversion to the structures of mentorship. We have an aversion to structures that anything that feels rigid, because those things inherently feel like they are limiting us and limiting our expressions and limiting our freedom. And actually, that's exactly what the masculine does. It is limiting. So if we think about the structure of our body, there is a lifespan to our body. And at the end of that is death. And we don't want that. It's scary. It's horrible. But there is a structure there. And if we fight against that, we're going to have this really painful interaction with death. The same way we have structures in our society. Those structures, we go out, I have to get a job, I have to have money, I have to pay my bills, I have to do, all of these things are a part of these structures, positive or negative, that we have to deal with. And in the same way, the Kundalini is going to magnify and highlight whenever we're out of alignment in our body, or when we're out of alignment with the structures of society or families or anything like that. So the part of this work, and this is what has taken me forever to really appreciate and understand, because when I'm going to share just a little bit about my story here, which is when I first, about 30 years ago, I started having these Kundalini experiences. And at that point, I was living with my mom, and I was just coming out of this fundamentalist church. And I was having these experiences, and the structures of the church were in my head saying I'm possessed by the devil, because anything like happening like that outside of the church meant it was the devil. I had these structures from society that was saying this is mental illness or psychosis or something. And I didn't know what to do with that. Maybe that was right, but I was also having these really positive things that were coming from it. And part of what happened was I had this vision, and I went to California based on this vision, and I reconnected with this guru who I'd met when I was a kid. And his name was Swami Muktananda, and this is where I really immersed myself into Kashmir Shaivism. And he started this organization called Siddha Yoga. And I went back there, and I started reading what they were saying from Siddha Yoga. And it was explaining everything that was happening to me. And then I would talk to other people there, and they would have similar experiences. So I thought, okay, now I have a system, and I'm immersing myself in this system. then I heard about all these abuses that were happening by him. He was saying he's celibate, he's sleeping with all these women, there's all these cover-ups, all this stuff that was happening. So I left the system and spent a lot of time trying to figure out what was what's true, what's not true. And this is the part too, I want to bring up this as a part of Kashmir Shaivism, that the guru-disciple relationship for thousands of years has, maybe 1,000 years, has been a part of, a really necessary part of this tradition. And in our country, we have about 50 years of gurus tradition. It's not even a tradition. Came to our country, taught us some things, and just like Muktananda and just like Yogi Bhajan, there was these abuses of power that were happening. And so it is easy to just try to toss all of that out. But I also do want to say that this guru-disciple tradition is a really important part of the framework, a part of this structural framework of this. And the guru is, if there's a healthy relationship or there's a healthy part relationship, the guru helps to instill the teachings into the body and spirit of the disciple. Not only that, the guru takes away some of the karmic patterns of the disciple. So remember we talked about earlier, we have this accumulated patterns upon patterns upon patterns that our individual limited self, we can't shift that on our own. We do need these forces to help. So the tradition of the guru is he or she is supposed to come help internalize and shift some of those patterns. And in exchange, the disciple worships the guru. And I do believe that in a culture that's not so, especially in the United States, so focused on money, sex, and power, that those relationships can be healthy. But of course, they came here and all the guru scandals. And at this point, I think most people in America, if you talk about having a guru, they'll just say, that sucks. That's ridiculous. You don't need a guru. You can do it on your own. And I think that's a disservice and a disrespect to the tradition. Well, I also recognize why people say that. But I think one of the things that it points to is the fact that maybe having a guru in that Indian tradition is not helpful for us here, but having a mentor definitely is. And I think what it points to, especially in our culture, is the fact that sorry, what's that? Okay. Is the fact that we are out of alignment with, and we have a unhealthy relationship with elders, with mentorship, with people in positions of power. We're already starting, we have these cultural dissonance and cultural rejection of some of those hierarchical models. Positive or negative, that is how it is. But I think that, again, like if we can recognize there's abuses of power within these systems, but also recognize that there is a purpose, that there are people who have walked this path before us and who can help us navigate some of the pitfalls. But within our culture, that this tension between the feminine principle and the masculine principle shows up as a rejection of anybody telling me what to do, or anybody giving me guidance, or anybody who thinks they know something more than me. And it's a part of this Western hyper focus on this individualism. And so it's tricky. It's tricky. So I know a lot of people out there that are going through their Kundalini awakening and they don't have a good mentor. And I found several mentors throughout my life that have been invaluable. And they're not all within this Kashmir Shaivist tradition, but they have been invaluable in ways that I didn't even appreciate till much later. Actually, you know what I want to do is I want to stop now. And does anyone, I know I just went through a whole bunch of stuff here. And I do want to take a little time now before I jump into the next topic. Does anybody have a question about anything? Let me see. This is why, okay. Awakening someone's in this chaotic, spontaneous. Okay, so the question is, why do you think Kundalini begins to awaken? In some of us in this chaotic, spontaneous manner. So if we go back to the original story, the Kundalini awakens due to our prayer because things have gotten so bad. It's a prayer to open up this channel to spirit. And the chaos is inherent to Kundalini. Kundalini is inherently chaotic. And what she's looking for is the union with Shiva. So Shiva provides the ground and the stability in our body, life, soul, whatever, for the spirit to soar. But when Kundalini awakens, she starts to magnify and show us the places inside of ourselves where we are not in harmony. And so what she's really trying to teach us is, hey, you need to have a disciplined, stable Shiva core so that I can do what I need to do. So on the one hand, Kundalini is looking for that Shiva, and Shiva is also looking for spirit. Shiva on his own, just from the stories of Shiva, when there's no spirit, when there's no Shakti, Shiva is sitting alone on his mountaintop in meditation, completely almost checked out from the world, immersed in his own self and his own meditation. And Shakti, the goddess, will start to come in and start to see if he'll wake up. And she will start to play with him. And if she gets just the right spot, he'll wake up and they will create universes together. So the goddess is chaotic. Shiva is sometimes too stiff and rigid. And when they come together, when there's enough harmony between the two, that's what they want to create. But again, so if Kundalini wakes up and it's chaotic, she's just reflecting the chaos, and that we need to transform to find the order inside is a part of the game. Let me see. What's the next question? What exactly is a Kundalini awakening? Yeah. What exactly is a Kundalini? The Kundalini awakening is the part of us that remembers that what we're looking for is inside, and that the Shakti is the Kundalini Shakti that's inside wants to find the Shiva inside. That we're tired of looking outside of ourselves. We're tired of that forgetting game, and it's the part of it that wants to remember that what we're looking for is inside. Let me see. The importance of finding authentic information text that don't translate this. Okay. To touch upon the importance of finding authentic information / text that don't translate the sacred workings to our language and understanding with incorrect intention. Could you rewrite that? I'm not sure what that means. I'm gonna go to the next
question. So my question is essentially, do you think you could touch upon how somebody that's going through an awakening can find correct information? And because, for instance, I have a friend in India who I speak to on occasion, and he is always talking about how there's different gurus and such that work with the Indian government and that utilize the information to persuade a certain type of thought form. And how that can sometimes come up in like the translations of the Gita, and etc., in order to push certain cultural ideologies, and that some of the translations into English and into a way that fits our understanding are actually weaponizing some of the sacred teachings and not exactly translating them in an authentic manner.
Yeah, so welcome to Kali Yuga. So Kali Yuga is this age that we're in when these, so again, this has all been tracked out. At the beginning, Big Bang, who knows when it was, there are these 4 ages from this tradition. Sattva Yuga, when peace, equanimity, health, good relationships, those dominate. And then there's 4 ages, and we're in the last age called the Kali Yuga, which is when everything has gone to shit, materialism and selfishness reign. It's hard to find good teachers. When you do, things are still fucked up. So part of this is welcome to Kali Yuga. Now, there's a benefit though. Is in Sattva Yuga, God is kind of far away. our prayers don't really reach the spirit because there's not any challenges. Everything's good. Why should we have this connection that we long for? We don't even really long for it. It's just right there. But in this age of Kali Yuga, what my mentors have said is, if your prayer and your intent is there and your emotion and your prayer is there, the spirit will show up, even if it's in a corrupted form, because the text and the translation, that's almost beside the point for all this stuff. When you have a teacher or you have a teaching and it comes into your body and it just starts to work. So you may see some words, and I've definitely done this. I don't agree with that, but if I've had my teacher and it just comes into my body and it makes sense in my body. And again, you got to remember, a lot of this stuff is oral tradition. You sit with your teacher. They may not even say anything. They may be a silent teacher, but you sit with them and there are things coming through them. So, but a part of what you're saying too is we need to have discernment. We need to check in with ourselves. We need to listen. What I would say is, me too. I may say something that you may think, this is crazy. This doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit. Fine, toss it out. But have that discernment in yourself. And if you don't, it's helpful. But discernment is tough too, because sometimes we throw things out because we're wounded about stuff. And we toss something out, even though it's actually helpful. So this is a good check-in. This is another one of those Shiva practices of, once we have enough of our nonsense cleared away and we can start to check in with ourselves and trust ourselves. And also, I would add, have a community of people that we can bounce things off of, that will keep us in check, that will keep us humble, that will have us think about things we may not normally think about. Other than that, we're in Kali Yuga, so you're going to have to deal with it.
Thank you for that.
Okay. Let me see. Why did unhealthy patterns start and lead to karma that lead to Kundalini to go to sleep? Then, of course, the patterns become too much, and then we are ready for Kundalini to awake from its sleeping. Unhealthy patterns started because we wanted them to. The separation that happened at the beginning of the universe only really leads to unhealthy patterns. Patterns of separation, patterns of entanglement, patterns of disease. This is a part of the game that we all chose to play. And if all the patterns were healthy, we'd be in the Sattva Yuga. We wouldn't have any things to play with. So there wouldn't be any impetus to heal. This gets into really complicated things about karma and things like that, which I'm not sure we're going to get into today.
Sounds like a learning process too.
Okay, let me pause here for a second. Within a lot of kind of modern cultural new age things, it's like we're here to learn or we're here to ascend. Within Kashmir Shaivism, no, we're not here to learn anything. There's nothing to learn. We are here to experience. We're here to create beautiful things. We're here to devote ourselves to God or spirit or creation or music, but there's not like this is your lesson kind of thing. There is no lesson. It's the universe contracts and forgets and then remembers. And within that, let's have some fun and explore. But you can switch it up if you want, but that's from the tradition. There's no big lesson at the end of it. It's just to experience separateness and all the different ways we can experience through separateness. Mm-hmm. And so I can even add this part too, that if you have really felt that longing and separateness, and then maybe even something outside of yourself, you have a relationship, somebody that you love, somebody that and that coming together is so passionate and beautiful and ecstatic. That's the point. And then when you lose it again, and the longing and the abandonment, within this tradition, it's to feel all of those things. And then to take that and say, wait a minute, that longing I'm looking for is something inside of me. And to take that longing and praise into that remembrance inside. And this is called Bhakti Yoga. It's this yoga of devotion, which I might explain in a little bit. We can get back to in a little bit. Let me see what we got here. Okay. So calling them patterns, how to navigate the feeling of grief, because letting go of these patterns feels like a loss of identity. Great question. Great question. That is exactly. There is something from this, from Kashmir Shaivism. Our identity is based on holding on to a collection of patterns. And what the Kundalini does is it shakes us up and says, you are not this collection of patterns. And that is one of the biggest freakouts. If you've had a psychedelic experience where you've had an ego death, same thing. The patterns of identity we've grafted ourselves onto, even if it's suffering and I'm horrible and I'm a piece of shit and I'm whatever, when the Kundalini comes and says, wait a minute, you are not that. A lot of people will just, no, I'm not ready to let that go because I don't know what's on the other side. And what's on the other side. And so this is a part of, in older animist traditions, they had processes for helping people die. This is what the old initiations were about, that we've mostly lost touch with, is learning how to die to this collection of patterns that you were, so something new can come up. Yeah, you need that process. Yes, we all need that process. We all need to remember what it's like to die, then be reborn into something new, and then die again and be reborn into something new. And unfortunately, we're in a cultural moment where people on politically, whatever it is, are grafting even more tightly onto whatever identity that they have. And from this tradition, that's a recipe for disaster. Because these identities are really malleable. And underneath is this union. We need to, some of those identities need to die so that something new can be reborn. But if we're holding on tightly to identity, and the only thing I can say is you got to feel it, you got to feel the grief, you got to feel the pain. And so a part of this tradition too, a part of Bhakti Yoga, we'll cycle back, is a real devotion to feeling. And if you've seen like kirtan events or anything, if you go to music, if you really deeply feel, that in itself is a part of Bhakti Yoga, which is you take those feelings and you channel them into spirit, and you channel them into prayer. And it's a really beautiful process. So yeah, really deeply feeling them will start to help them shift. Let's see. What can I do to loosen that grip of I don't woo. What can you do to loosen that grip? Let's come back to that. I don't have an answer for that right now. Okay. So what I want to do now is let me see if I can just pull up my notes real quick. Yeah. So this is a plant medicine people podcast, which so I'm sure most of you are familiar with or enjoy plant medicines. Now, if you look at the teachers of Shaivist Tantra or Kashmiri Shaivism, they will say, don't use psychedelics, almost across the board, almost across the board. And before I critique that, I just want to say that opening up psychedelics, working with psychedelics, as most of you know, on its own presents a whole range of challenges, similar to the Kundalini stuff we're talking about. There's a lot of crossover, ego death, confronting my shadow and patterns, and how do I deal with all these things? And I mean, it's just a lot. So you working with psychedelics, you got a lot on your plate from that. Adding Kundalini to that, Kundalini practices to that, it's like adding just a bunch of gasoline right on top of that flaming pile on there. Go ahead, just pour some gasoline. So I think that there is a good thing to think about, which is, I'm not going to say don't combine them, because I personally benefited from the combination of both. But I will say, whatever it is that you're doing, give yourself plenty of time with yourself, with community, to really explore what's coming up and how to work with it. And I think that within our culture, we do have a tendency, myself included. I just want to go. Let's do it. Let's get there fast. Let's get there. Do it. Kundalini, psychedelics, ayahuasca. Let's just do it. Boom. And it's taken me a long time to really appreciate the slowing down aspect and giving things time. And so I think the overall critique of the tantric people is, hey, slow down. Combining these things. Also, they'll say you don't need them. They're another external thing. They're another external thing that you just want to add on, and you can't experience spirit without psychedelics, and that's a problem. Valid concerns. However, if you look at the tradition, Shiva himself is pictured with there's like these soma nectar. Shiva himself is was Datura. If you go to India, there's tons of sadhus who are smoking weed. These substances have been a part, especially of tantric practices, for a long time. So there is a connection within this tradition for using substances. But again, we are in a culture where we don't have context, we don't have traditions, we don't have mentors to help guide us through these challenging things. I mean, sometimes in the old days, your teacher would take you to a cave for a few months to go work on some of this stuff and to really explore before getting out. Now we're going to these ayahuasca retreats. I'm having my Kundalini experience. I'm going right back into work, and it's crazy. It's crazy. Let me see, what is it? We all need help. Yes, plants are our guides. That's what Nora says. Plants are our guides, but I do want to add, if we just have plants as our guides and not people, we may be missing something. We may be missing certain reflections. There's certain things that plants show us that are just direct, immediate, hey, take a look at this, which is great. But because plants work on this mythic level, there may be certain things that we're not seeing or understanding or even translating from them. So this real, direct, authentic relationship with mentors, guides, friends on this human level, I think is invaluable. And I do think, yes, we need to connect to plants and understand their wisdom, but we also need to understand this human thing too. All right, let me see. Anything more here? Okay, I wanted to switch over, or not switch over. So I talked at the beginning about when people start shaking and having their things and whether it's in a psychedelic process or not, I'm having my Kundalini experience. Nobody in this culture says I'm having an Ashe experience and the Orisha enter my body. So I don't know who understands any of those words. And I just wanted to talk to you about it. I know I see one, Raphael knows what I'm talking about. A part of my training after I left Kashmir Shaivism, I found my capoeira teacher. And my capoeira teacher was connected to a spiritual tradition called candomblé. And it took me about 10 years of mentorship with him before he let me go to Brazil and see what they were doing down there. And when I got to go down there, I saw what was happening. I got to experience what was happening. And I thought, oh, these people are connecting to the Kundalini, but they have a whole different system around what is this, what's happening. what happens is the drumming, there's a lot of different parts to it. I'm gonna go really, really simple. They go into a trance. The drum and the rhythms come, and then they start shaking. And when they do, their view is that the orisha, these gods, start to enter their body. And there are a lot of structures around all of that. I got such a small glimpse and taste of that. But they are working with the Kundalini. They don't call it that. The spirit is called Ashe. The gods are entering their body. And when I saw it, I thought, okay, here's a whole different system and structure. Within Kashmir Shaivism, I don't know if you guys have experienced this too, is when the Kundalini wakes up, you may feel entities, right? Anybody feel entities? Within our culture, the existence of entities and spirits is not integrated in. So sometimes when this happens and people have their Kundalini experience, or even just a medicine experience, and they experience an entity, first instinct, get it out. I need to clear this entity out. Now, maybe that does need to happen, but what it also shows is that we are in a system and a structure. Yes, they've been given a bad rap. Thanks, Noah. We're in a system and structure where entities, we don't even have a classification of gods, nature spirits, darker spirits, hungry ghosts, all these different things that come from Buddhism, Orisha from Brazil. In Brazil, where I went, these spirits were so integrated in that, you go by the roadside and there would be food left for certain gods on the road. There would be certain parts of town that would be associated with different spirits. There would be foods. Everybody's in a context for understanding all of this stuff. So there's a community and cultural, this is a part of that masculine principle, an understood context for all of these forces. So when people go to the temple and the priest says this and you do this and this is you just go right into it. You don't have to think about anything. You just go right in. You got your system. Here's how you feed this god. Here's how you do that. There's a lot of payment. So in our culture, we tend to think, oh, we're capitalists. There's a lot of payment there. There's a lot of reciprocity and payment and money going in. And if you want to do your ceremony, you're going to need all this stuff. But there's a cultural context and container for all of that. And one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up is that, again, people have this idea of Kundalini that for the most part comes from Yogi Bhajan. So I wanted to open it up and say, okay, there is a Kashmir Shaivist understanding. There is a Candomblé understanding that don't ask me about because I'm really not an expert on that. But in my limited experience, I could see and feel it was the same energy, just a whole different system around that. Any thoughts around any of that? Okay. So along with that, there are modern systems right now being developed around connecting to spirit or Kundalini. Who's heard of trauma release exercises? Oh, hold on. Wait. Sorry, hold on. We'll pause for a second. Certain spirits come up at certain stages of spiritual development for those people. Let me say again, I'm not an expert on Candomblé. As far as I know, the idea of spiritual development, they don't have, at least in the way we do. I will tell a story that my mentor told me, just so you get some basic understanding. His grandmother was a Mãe de Santo. Mãe de Santo means mother of saints. It's a priestess in their religion. When his grandmother died, he has a family. I'm going to throw not spiritual development. I'm going to throw obrigação, obligation. He has a family obligation to the Orisha, to the gods. When his grandmother died, the people got together in the community and said, who is now has to take on this obligation? And it was determined that it was his sister. And he said, whew, thank God, because I don't want any part of that. So just so you know, we tend to think of, oh, spiritual, and no, it is an obligation. Obrigação. No, he said, woo, his sister put off this obligation for years. And then what happens? Things start to go wrong because the gods are saying, you have this thing to do. And she says, ugh. And eventually, okay, fine. And then it's a whole 7-year process to just get the basics. So I think my limited white American understanding of this is it is not spiritual development as much as obligation, and you get picked to be the one to have to do the thing that a lot of people don't want to do. So just so you know, also it's very similar here with Kundalini and spirit. There tend to be more obligations that come online the more we are working with spirit. Sounds like a job. Yeah, it's a job. It is a job. And if you've noticed, when Kundalini wakes you up in the middle of the night and starts shaking you, and you have to go sit up and pray and work with it, and I got to go to work tomorrow. And she's like, I don't care. You have this thing you got to do. So again, we're in America where we just think, oh, I'm going to have this Kundalini and everything's going to be beautiful. No, it's going to be more work and more obligations and more headaches and hassles. And I kind of want to throw that part in too, if you guys want to work with this. These are good questions. Anything else? Sounds like a job. Oh, let me see. I think spiritual development means becoming one with it all, meaning having an awareness and responsibility like the earth and all of life, like we are connected and directly impact each other. Yes, great. Let me weave in a couple of conflicting viewpoints within spirit and Kundalini. From the Kashmir Shaivism perspective, there is a way to look at it that it is this individual on his or her own who achieves this exalted state of merging with oneness. That is a goal within this tradition, to get back to oneness and to merge, and you've kind of successfully left the matrix. I don't want to disagree with that. And I think there's truth in that. But I think in our culture, we do get hyper fixated on leaving the matrix and becoming one and escaping this duality that sucks and is full of pain and sorrow and heartache that I don't want to feel. So I think people tend to graft onto that as I can escape with these practices. And within that, there is some truth to that, I think. But the other way to look at it is more of an animist perspective, which we haven't really gotten into, which is when we are in contact with spirit, we are able to serve the spirits and create something beautiful on earth with our families, with our culture. And so there's this other idea that we're not here to escape, but we're here to tap into the spirit that's inside of us so that we can use our human abilities in this act of creation. Music, art, good relationships, things like this that feed the spirit inside of us and in other people. So that's more of an interconnected view of this, as opposed to this isolated, me on my own escaping. Yeah, okay. And then so next, yes, trauma release. Who here has done trauma release exercises or knows about it? In my, yes, yeah, so a couple thumbs. In my view, the trauma release stuff is tapping into an aspect of Kundalini. People start kind of tapping, or even the somatic, like the like a lot of modern breath work. People are breathing, and then the spirit starts to come. People start shaking and moving, and I think they're tapping into an aspect of Kundalini with that. The critique I have around that, on the one hand, it's approachable for people, But on the other hand, it's even in the name of trauma release, it begins and ends on trauma. And so in our culture, we are hyper fixated on trauma and this endpoint of releasing it. Whereas within the Kundalini tradition, all of the traumas and pains are a part of it, and working through that, the next step and the main part of it is a deeper connection and relation to spirit. But the trauma release is and even a lot of the breath work stuff that's happening is a product of this modern culture that we're in. And within this modern culture, it's not a lot of room for spirit. But it is a great entry point for people to start to access certain things. But I just wanted to name that as another aspect of, oh, I have Kundalini. Oh, wait a minute, hold on. What about Ashe from Brazil? What about trauma release and somatic breath work and all these different things? Holotropic breathing. You may be able to access Kundalini within these states. But again, I think one of the drawbacks is if you start to access these states, and I've worked with people who have done these things, and then you start to go deeper into these realms of spirit where the shaking continues and you start keep going, and it doesn't fit in with the model of how the trauma release is supposed to go, where the facilitator hasn't really done a lot of their Kundalini work or Ashe work. They may just leave a participant and say, okay, well, I don't know what to do. And they may have a lot more that needs to come up that they may not be able to have access to. And then with that, if you look, there's a lot of descriptions of what's called shaking medicine all around the world, Africa, Asia. There are these descriptions that people have of the same process. And it's their construct, that masculine principle, the construct is so culturally mediated. Like in Brazil, there's not, I try to talk to people, there's no concept of like liberation in the way that we do here, or moksha, or this like Buddhist Hindu thing. It's just being in relation with the gods seems to be enough. And again, I'm not an expert on this, but what I'm trying to say is that the spirit is this universal principle, and the experiences and things that people have are almost identical. But then the ideas people have around it are so mediated by culture. And I think that can't help but happen. And so one of the things I wanted to bring to you guys too, especially today as we finish this up, is Kundalini, psychedelics, all of this is impacting and shifting and changing our culture, and the language that we develop around it. What is its purpose? Why am I connected to it? What is this bumping up against? What are the ideas that I have? And how is it challenging those ideas? Or how is it helping me to grow these ideas? And there is a new culture that is forming, especially around psychedelics and this intersection of all of these forces. And we can't help but in our culture to bring our cultural baggage right onto it. So, I mean, we can name these different aspects of culture or aspects of thoughts we have around ourselves. It's just really, what I want you to do is, guys, is think about all the things you're bringing into Kundalini or spirit or psychedelics, and really challenging and exploring where those things come from inside of you. So let me see what these questions are. Oh yes, please check out the Emerald podcast. His stuff is great. Is there a safe way to combine the two of Kundalini and psychedelics? Let me see. Well, this is Laura. I'm not sure. Oh, Laura, who Laura is. Is our Kundalini experiences happening to you now in psychedelic ceremonies? Is that? Spontaneous awakening a few years back. Yeah. Let me, this is tough. Before I try to answer that question, I want to explore safety real quick. I think the modern idea of safety is not helpful in a lot of ways. I actually just wrote a blog post on this for the Plant Medicine People website, that safety just has come to mean too much. You know, on the one hand, safety is imminent danger of death or severe physical harm, things like that. And some people use it to, over here in this place of, I was uncomfortable because somebody expressed anger. And so I don't think this word is helpful, especially when describing combining these Kundalini and psychedelics. I mean, the goal is that we create a container within our body, or if we're in a ceremony, where transformation can happen, where the facilitators and the spirits of the place and the relationships are anchored enough, and that people do feel safe enough to surrender into and allow these things to be transformed. And so I think the ritual container needs to, on the one hand, be grounded enough to allow people to surrender in and feel safe and comfortable and be like, okay, I can work in this space. It also has to be flexible enough sometimes to allow crazy shit to happen. And sometimes the safest thing is to let somebody just scream for a 20 seconds and then come back and then feel into, and then be quiet and then allow things to come up. So the safety too, even getting back to what we were talking about at the beginning, that the Kundalini experiences and the psychedelic experiences share a common thread of pushing us into ego death. And that's not going to feel safe. And sometimes it's not safe, especially if we're not in a field that can handle it. So it's tricky. Oh, what's the name of the blog? Let me see if I can pop the blog up. I'll have to find the blog later, Vanessa. Okay, so wait a minute. So if my Kundalini woke up within the last few months, what do I do going forward with it? Good question. I would suggest finding a teacher, hopefully close to you, that you can work with. And usually, I would suggest very strong grounding physical body practices. Really getting in touch with your physical body. For me, what I had to go through was actually the capoeira training I did was invaluable. And that wasn't even a Kundalini practice, but I needed to move and I needed a disciplined structure like that. So I don't think there's a one size fits all answer. Some people may need more stillness, going out into nature and just meditating by a waterfall. I needed intense warrior training. So I think a part of the way to think about this is that if you have a Kundalini awakening, on the one hand, recognize this is your own prayer coming alive, and trusting, or trying to find a place of trust inside yourself that there will be some guidance that comes up. And I really do think a mentor is invaluable. And be prepared for a mentor to show up that is not what you expect. And again, like a couple of my main mentors, not even Kundalini people, but they had the right system and structure for me to learn in ways I was totally unprepared for. Okay, yeah. How does one know when, well, when Kundalini has woken up? again, I don't even want to say, how do you know when Kundalini has woken up? Because really, until you've immersed yourself in Tantric Shaivist conception of what that even means, let's put it this way. How do you know when you start to connect to spirit? It could be shaking and vibration in the body. It could be knowing other people's thoughts. It could be predicting the future. It could be deities showing up and talking to you. It could be any number of these things. And instead of saying Kundalini woken up, again, let's say the spirit has come alive inside of you. And I think that's a little bit more of a broad thing. And if Kundalini is like a path you want to follow, I would suggest diving in and exploring Shaivist tantric literature, Kashmir Shaivism, so you really understand the context and really understand what that means from this tradition. Otherwise, I would say just call it spirit for now. All right. Woo. All right. You guys ready for the last little bit here? Wait, you're putting that in. Oh, wait. Oh, okay. Okay. I'm going to put that in the chat. Shaivism or this Tantra. Actually, as I'm telling you that, I might as well tell you about another, spiritual people love to argue with each other about who's right. So I want to tell you about another argument that's happening between the classical Shaivist Tantra people and the New Age Neo-Tantra people. The classical people say that the New Age Neo-Tantra people are doing a lot of cultural appropriation and taking this word Tantra, that if you guys have heard of Tantra, you probably heard of Neo-Tantra, which was started maybe 40 or 50 years ago and is largely sexual practices. And so the classical people say, you guys are culturally appropriating, you're taking this word out of this context, and you're basically just using these energies for sex. The Neo-Tantra people say, hey, you guys are uptight. Sex is a part of creation, and why not explore these energies in the sexual context? Instead of weighing in on that, I will just say my camp more is in the classical Tantra tradition with its whole range and lineage, while also recognizing that there's a point to be made over here by the Neo-Tantra people. But I do think it's a better direction to explore the classical stuff if you've had a Kundalini awakening. And let me just explain why. It's when the Kundalini wakes up, let's say pre-Kundalini or pre-spirit connection, we are mostly trapped by patterns. We are mostly trapped by the patterns of our world, our life, and really we're small, we're powerless. When the Kundalini wakes up, it's a lot of power that starts to come through. And that power can be incredibly destructive, and we can create more and more patterns that we will then eventually have to deal with. So I think it is important to get some context on how to channel and work with that power before we go off the deep end, whether it's Neo-Tantra. I'm not even trying to signal out Neo-Tantra. I'm just trying to say that we can create all sorts of entanglements with other people and with other things based on this thing now opening up inside of us. And to get grounded into something is really important. Really important. Okay. So lastly, lastly, what I wanted to share with you guys is I touched on it a little bit earlier about, it's actually this need for relationships. And so one of the things that definitely in this modern world that we suck at is relationships. And I think somebody had mentioned earlier, relationships with the plants is essential. I agree. Having a better relationship with the natural world and being into communion and some kind of harmony with the natural world. But I also want to include other people. Let me see, hold on one second. If anything that I've learned from Kundalini is that the underlying structures that we talked about at the beginning, the harmony or disharmony that we are in will be revealed through relationships. So if we're clearly in this modern world out of harmony with the natural world and with the earth. And so these bigger questions around how do we get into a right relationship with the earth, with the plants, with the natural world. There is the same thing I touched on earlier about good relationship with mentors, good relationship with friends, healing even these wounded parts that show up with family members. I mean, these are to me like really big, important questions around working with the spirit, Kundalini, whatever you want to call it, is the shadow, our own shadow will show up in these immediate relationships. And so if we can use that to reflect back into us and explore inside of us what needs to be healed, what needs to be worked through, what needs to be looked at, I think that is a really important place to start as we reinterpret spirit, Kundalini, psychedelics into this modern world. And I think it's up to you guys, all of us, not you guys, me too, all of us, to take responsibility and ownership of that. Psychedelics, Kundalini, all of it. It's in the same vein. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Ram Dass. If you think you're enlightened, spend a week with your family. Yeah, Ram Dass is great. Anybody that has Kundalini questions, I would just say read some Ram Dass too. He'd be super helpful. So that is it for my lecture part. I just want to open it up for some more questions. Anybody has?
I don't have a question. I just want to thank you for the conversation and for everyone who is here. And it's been very valuable. And of course, it's created more like curiosity, more stuff to maybe dive into. So thank you.
Okay, great. All right. So Kat told me to remind you guys that you will receive an email on Wednesday with access to the recording, as well as a link for 20% off one-on-one sessions with me. So again, we are in capitalism, and now I have to sell myself, which it seems ridiculous, but here we are. Let me see, what is this? Now I have a new rabbit hole to go into with Kashmir Shaivism. Yeah, good luck. You can spend a decade exploring that rabbit hole. Let's see, if I have a bounds of shaking, should I go through with it or should I try to control it? I would not try to control it. What I would, so the way that I usually talk about this, and this is a little bit tricky, is that if you try to control Kundalini, she will destroy you. But there is a way to learn to guide and channel and dance with her. I talk about this usually as like the Kundalini is like the ocean. And if you're standing on the shore and a wave is coming at you and you say, get back on there, the wave doesn't give a shit. It's going to come and you're going to get swept out to sea. But you build a boat or you get on your surfboard and you find out where the waves are going, you can work with them to travel way further than you ever could have without those waves. But if you try to control it, disaster. But there is a dance and there's a way to feel into the waves inside yourself and just ride them and explore. But this is a complicated to put into practice. Yeah. All right. I do want to say this last thing. I don't even think I touched on this, but it has to do with that ocean. This Kundalini, I have one pet peeve around this, which is people say, oh, Kundalini, I've done that before. Kundalini isn't something to do. Kundalini is the goddess of creation. And there is a proper way to relate to her, which is with respect and humility and reverence. And this is another one that's tough for us in our culture, to how to approach the goddess. And this doesn't mean that we lose our sense of self and agency and just into a puddle and, oh, I'm worthless, I'm nothing. No, but there is a way to approach her with reverence. She is the goddess of creation. She's a part of you. She's a part of me. She is her own force. And there is a way to approach with humility and prayer and devotion that she will see and feel and respond to. So, okay, hold on. There's a bunch of questions here. Control, yeah. Not being afraid of failure or destruction is a big part of surrender and control. Yes. And when destruction comes, it's good to have community around to help, because destruction is a part of this process. How about channeling and circling the energy with an element like earth or fire? I have found that to be helpful to let it flow rather than resisting. Yeah, everybody is going to have their own little practices that help and that work. Some work for some work for others. And again, I think it's super important to work with a teacher on this. But also, if you find a practice that works on your own, go do it. Yeah, it's great. All right. Anything else? All right. Last call. Oh, wait, hold on. Thank you very much for your time and wisdom. Okay. Thanks, Poe. I would just say a lot of time, wisdom, and so many mistakes. So many mistakes. I'm so fortunate that she did not annihilate me. So, yeah. Appreciate you guys. I will, yeah, the recording will be out except for the first 10 minutes. That's my fault. But, all right. Thank you all. It was great doing this. Okay. Let me see. How do I stop?